I'm Ørjan Pettersen, and I'm an expert 4-level instructor with Spartans Academy, where I've been teaching for around 8 years, and I've been with the Academy for a total of 10 years now. In my professional career, I work in people leadership, so I manage large-scale customer management operations, which is what I combine with my work as a Krav Maga instructor with Spartans. And there's a very natural affiliation between the two jobs, because you take a lot of skills around how you manage people and lead people into the arena of teaching and training Krav Maga, and the transferable back as well. So the skills that you acquire in terms of teaching Krav Maga and the discipline and the focus that's required to do self-defense, and teaching it and training it at a high level are also things that you transfer back into the arena of business leadership too. My motivation to start training Krav Maga was an incident where I became aware of my need to develop better self-defense skills. Now, the incident in question wasn't a physical one, but it was one where self-defense skills could easily have been required in that situation. So at the time I did some research around what was suitable. I didn't know about Krav Maga at the time, but I discovered it through my research, and it seemed to be absolutely the appropriate system to acquire better self-defense skills. And that's how I learned about Spartans Academy, and that was 10 years ago. And I located the nearest school to myself. I went to a trial session at the time, absolutely fell in love with it, and I commenced really dedicated discipline training, multiple sessions every week. I conducted solo training by myself. I used every opportunity to attend our weekend seminars, our international travel where we went abroad to develop skills, thematic sessions that we had around specific skills and so forth. And I always found that, if you give the kind of dedication and discipline that I refer to into it, that's the key to the progression of moving forward. So within a couple of years after that kind of very intense focused training, I had the opportunity to start developing as an instructor. And I've been on that journey ever since. So for 8 years now, very progressively, stage by stage, I've moved through various instructor training courses, qualifications, accreditations, both in the UK and abroad, together with Yorkshire, our chief instructor, and our partners that we work with abroad as well. So having developed that over 8 years, I also moved through the system of gradings that we have, or tests that accredits you to different levels of skill and instructor accreditations. So I've been through that. So it's been a fantastic story for me. Thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a story that or a journey that I share with many of my colleagues at Spartans Academy, where it's fantastic enrichment to see other instructors and the students progress in the same way based on that mindset of very disciplined dedication to what we do. I think with self-defense, 95% of the skill that you acquire is to avoid having to take physical actions in self-defense. And the last remaining few percent are scenarios where taking physical action is unavoidable, so to speak. So as you learn self-defense, you discover that those 95%, which is based on your body language, how you appear in public, to not be attracted to as a victim of crime, your situational awareness, how you read physical, emotional and human environments to avoid conflict situations, understanding your own psychology, how you respond to situations and other people's i.e. criminal psychology, how they would approach crime. You learn to avoid the situations that would lead to having to take physical self-defense action. That's essentially is the biggest learning for me, yeah. And I can foresee in my last 10 years a number of situations where if I hadn't had that understanding, situations could very easily have developed, or I've been able to step away from situations on the basis of that I can foresee where they would lead to based on my Krav Maga knowledge. So I've been fortunately able to kind of avoid a lot of it, yeah, and also guiding other people to do the same, which has been an enrichment. Prior to Krav Maga, I've been involved in situations where, not too many fortunately, where you had to kind of take some physical action, but as I said, you learn to avoid them now, yeah. I can remember my first class, absolutely, and it was a great experience. I attended it at the back of this incident where I was placed in a situation by choice in defense of a third party to try and de-escalate a situation that could easily have led to a conflict arising. And at the back of that, I recognized my need for self-defense training. So I found Spartans. I came to my first trial session, and my first experience essentially was our chief instructor, Yorkshire, explaining the motivation or the incident that I've been in, and how I would approach it in a kind of a safer way. So that was my first learning. We actually addressed something through self-defense where there was no physical action, but I learned how to kind of approach it. Our sessions at the time, our first one was in Sheffield. I absolutely loved. We learned different solutions and techniques, and I kind of recognized that this is something that I want to do much more of. And I attended on a weekly basis more of our weekly sessions across Yorkshire and the northeast at the back of that. But it was a thoroughly enjoyable experience. I think what many people discover when they come to Krav Maga is that it's based on absolutely real life scenarios. Yeah, it's not a sport. Yeah, it doesn't have rules. It doesn't have a referee. It's based on the actual experience that everyday people can connect with, whether there are actual threats of violence or physical violence occurring, spanning any kind of scenario, as Krav Maga covers everything from the bullying in the playground with younger children or adolescents, all the way up through and including terrorism, violence at the other end of the spectrum. And in between you have everything else that can occur, street violence, violence in the home, violence in kind of public settings and on the road, public transport and so forth. So people, I think, recognize, like myself, that this is really applicable to real life and is something that is absolutely worthwhile investing in from a kind of time and energy perspective. And that was my initial thoughts around my experiences in my first session and first few months of training. This really applies to real life. $80 to 90% of our training is obviously focused on the self-defense physical action. We learn techniques, we learn solutions, we learn striking, we learn how to the movement and the management of self-defense scenarios or violent threats or attacks. So obviously we spend a lot of time on that, and we learn to be very proficient and progressively fitter and stronger and faster to respond to those kind of incidents and occurrences. So that's obviously is a big learning. That's central to Krav Maga, that we learn how to do that. Ancillary to that experience are the things that we also cover in our sessions or in our material, whether that is online or in our coaching, around body language, your appearance, your situational awareness, your reading of environments, conflict management, distance management to conflict, and so forth. So those are, although in time invested in a class is probably 10 to 20% of the content. Yeah, you quickly, if you immerse yourself in that side, you learn that in terms of value has the same as your physical application, because those two things really are the kind of the essentials of Krav Maga. Avoidance, but when you can't avoid it, you absolutely learn how to handle it in the most efficient way. There are many myths out there. I think one central to me possibly is what we call in psychology the law of the instrument, or Maslow's hammer, as it's more popularly known as. And the law of the instrument is in psychological terms that people will go to the solution that is they're most familiar with. It doesn't just apply to self-defense, it applies generally in life. If you learn a skill or a way of handling a situation, that could be in I also work in business leadership, people leadership, where you go to there, or whether it's in family situations or everyday day life, people will tend to centralize to what they're most familiar with. In Krav Maga, I think a lot of Krav Maga organizations focus very much on this is how you strike, this is how you do action A, B, and C, and so forth. But we don't contextualize what should you do action A, B, and C? Should you execute this solution? Yeah, is it necessary? Yeah, what do you do beforehand? What do you do after? Yeah, so the physical action becomes the absolute kind of alpha and omega of what you learn and what you teach. So people go to the physical action as the law of the instrument, is their go-to solution. Yeah? And that I think is a thing that you have to manage very carefully through appropriate teaching in Krav Maga. You need to learn and to give people the skill that they're different solutions that they can go to. Yeah, you can choose conflict management. Yeah, you can choose psychologically to think how you take your ego out of a situation to extract yourself from it. Yeah, rather than to have a go-to solution always of the physical action, which is, an exciting part and a thrilling part of what we train and so forth. But that's a myth that I think you have to be careful with to manage in Krav Maga. There are many that I thoroughly love, and the basis of enjoying them is that they're very simple and they're very effective and they're easy to learn, and because of that basis they become very natural and flowing to do, so that in a situation under stress or trauma, you can apply kind of gross motor skills, which are the skills that are just left at the end of being in that kind of traumatic situation, to solutions to defend yourself. And because of that, there's one or two that are very simple that I find very good. One is where you close the distance very effectively and rapidly to an attacker by placing your elbows in front of your face with your hands on top of your head, and you move in with a very devastating strike using your elbows onto the attacker. Very simple to do, very effective, and most of all very easy to learn. Absolutely do it. Yeah, that's my first advice. What you get from Krav Maga, is many multiples what you actually kind of put into it. Because if you regard it as I'm learning self-defense purely from a perspective of I want to manage my personal safety and security, and being able to defend myself if attacked or threatened. That's obviously the central tenet of what Krav Maga is. But you acquire so much more on the side. Yeah, you learn so much more about your own body, how it works anatomically, physically, psychologically. You learn so much more about what positive body language is. Yeah, which translates itself into, you know, your body language is connected with your mental health. So if you have a positive body language, you influence your mental health positively. So does of course the physical training. You learn a lot about understanding the environment that you're in. Yeah. Kind of exploring it through being aware, understanding what is around you, making better decisions on that. And so forth. You learn about, as I said, your own psychology and other people's psychology. You learn the legal side of self-defense. You can take a step further and immerse yourself through what we do in specialist medical training. So now you become proficient in trauma management and manage kind of scenarios where there's threat to life and so forth, your own and others. And you can essentially help third parties through that as well. There's so much to Krav Maga. Yeah. So once you acquire that, your frame of mind will become much more confident. Yeah. Much more self-aware, and the old adage that you hear about, for example, public speaking being the number one kind of phobia in the UK and in many other countries, and people tell you to overcome that phobia by imagining an audience that are without clothes and so forth to make yourself at ease. Krav Maga essentially, in the same way, puts you in a situation where you can imagine your own capabilities and what you can do facing any kind of threat. Yeah, and it doesn't become a danger to you anymore, because you know that you can improvise and overcome and deal with so much more than maybe the average person can. So the kind of human fear doesn't come into it, or comes much less into it than maybe it did before. So your confidence, your ability to kind of socially interact and so forth is enhanced by it. So it isn't just about the physical skills you acquired, it kind of changes your life to a certain degree in terms of how you view the world and how you operate within the world.